Right, let's go. Okay, hello, welcome to episode 423 of the Self-Help Podcast with me, a slightly croaky Edward Lamb, and my good pal Sean Offord. How are you, Sean?
I'm very good. Why are you croaky?
Well, I got a bit of a cold, and I don't know if it's a post-vaccine jab 2 thing or what. I felt a little bit drowsy over the last week or so, but maybe it could be a football hangover as well. Who knows? Been a big week, hasn't it, for in England? And well,
yeah, the Italians were doing well. Final of Wimbledon, and then the final of the football.
Yeah, yeah, a bit of a shame for the footy. Obviously, we can talk. We're not doing an episode focusing on football related stuff that we probably could, because obviously, England lost in the final, which disappointing, but it was a good tournament, and generally, like the players and Gareth Southgate are quite well thought of, and it was, but big disappointment and a few kind of negative things that have come in the fallout to the match as well. So do you want to give a quick take on all that stuff, Sean?
I just think it's sad, really, that bit. It's like, if something goes wrong, who are we going to blame? Yeah, and one of the things that I love about the American people that I work with is the thing about we don't have problems, we have learning opportunities. Yeah, whereas a very British thing is who are we going to blame? Whose fault is it? Who are we going to hang out to dry for this one, rather than what can we learn from this so it doesn't happen again? And that just seems a classic kind of British thing to me. You were saying that some other countries that I was unaware of can be as equally nasty to their ethnic football players as we are. Just seems kind of sad, really. Yeah. I didn't know the other guys. Never seen him before, but Marcus Rashford, to me, he's a nice guy. He does a lot of good stuff, does what he can, and I don't care what colour he is. He's a good soul, he does the good bits.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting how that was jumped upon immediately, and obviously there are a few bad eggs out there that have responded horrifically poorly, but generally, it was a good tournament, good vibe and it's a young team as well. So, and there is that kind of, I know you're not a sporty guy and you don't always understand kind of you don't get into the rivalries around Liverpool, Everton in your family, but I mean, sport does have the power, doesn't it, to bring people together and to kind of create a bit of a good vibe.
It's interesting though, it's tribal, isn't it? It's like it brings the tribe together, but also because it's tribal, it creates an opposition tribe. So, and that's the thing about me in competition that I just don't understand, is the issue of why do we do it? Because so many people end up disappointed in the competition. It always just seems like bad odds. So it's the 9 people run a race, one person's happy, and 8 people are like, oh my God. So why can't we just enjoy the run, and not have a winner,
Yeah, well, I know obviously England haven't won a tournament for 55 years or something like that, is it? So, which is a long time, but I mean, the odds of winning a major tournament are tiny, and like 20, I don't know if it was 24 or 32 in this competition that started, 24 probably. And only one gets to win at the end, but there's a lot of good stories along the way, and
but England came amazingly close to winning. I mean, literally, right on the edge, wasn't it? So I mean, they did amazingly well.
They did. Yeah, I didn't feel too. I was gutted, but I wasn't like rolling on the floor in tears, because I've never seen England play in a final in my whole life, like a lot of people. But so that was cool, and next year is the World Cup again. So and it's a good young squad with good strong characters in it. So
when I was a kid at school, they used to bang on about this thing about it's not winning that counts, it's playing the game, it's taking part that counts. And that was something that was kind of pushed at us a lot. They used to get up my nose when I was a kid, but I kind of get it more now.
I know,
crazy.
It is, but we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about anxiety today and how you can tame it. So we'll come on to that in a minute. A quick shout out, any new listeners, go to liveinthepresent.co.uk for all the show notes and links and all previous episodes. And if you stick your email address in the box on the homepage. You'll get some free meditation files, which might come in handy after listening to this one in particular. So yeah, Sean, we're talking about anxiety today, and I take it this is related to a lot of things, but we are like gung ho in the UK, opening up on July the 19th, which is probably a few days after this gets published.
Yeah.
And people are a bit anxious about that, I assume. Is that why you've kind of wanted?
Well, the inspiration for this really came. I'm doing a global presentation as of tomorrow, which goes out across the world with a panel of people like me from different countries, and it's about COVID, mental health, and getting back into work and all that kind of stuff. And I'm doing the bit which is about anxiety and depression. And it seems very relevant to kind of bring that into what we're doing here. Three areas really. What I'd like to do is to do one on anxiety, which we've got, and the resources, a self-help guide. And then one on anger and one on depression, because they're three big areas that are coming up again and again and again. You know, and in the questions that I get asked as a panel, people are saying to me they involve one of those three all on, you know. Yeah. Which very often is about how do I stop wanting to rip the head off of the person next to me in work, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, the blog post you've written, so the first line is that anxiety is a good thing. So do you want to explain that before we talk about how horrendous it is?
So to me it's like this: the world is up and down, it's not flat. Yeah. The up, if it gets too high, is anxiety. The low, if it gets too low, is depression. But that flow, that rhythm of life is normal. But anxiety is just a way of knowing whether things are safe or not. So we have to be anxious to survive. There has to be a level of anxiety. It just means that you take care. When you cross the road, you look left, you look right, and then you look left again, and then you cross the road. So, and it's that little bit of anxiety that means that just says, okay, check the road before you cross. And that keeps us safe. So anxiety in its normal form is a really helpful, useful thing. It's something that we should all be thankful for.
Yeah.
It only becomes a problem when it becomes a disorder, which is when it becomes ridiculous. And so it's a bit like, I get that someone could be afraid of flying. I get that. But I've had people come to me in occupational health and in a state of anxiety. What's the matter? I've got a fear of flying. Okay. And you're going to get on a plane? Yes, we've got to get on a plane. We're going on holiday. When are you going? In 4 months' time. So the person's actually living the anxiety, not of flying, actually of crashing the plane, 4 months before they get on the plane. Now, if they feed that for 4 months, by the time they get on that plane, they're going to be a complete wreck. And it's that thing about understanding who you are, how you work, and how to deal with it, so that you don't just go crazy on it, which is what's happening, you know. And I think that the issue about us going back to work globally, which is happening, in Britain, we got this thing about the 19th, and then it sounds like, can't really be sure what happens, but it sounds like all bets are off after that. Do what you want. And if it is that, there's going to be a whole load of people I know they're going to spiral into anxiety, because the thing is, they may not be anxious about going back to work, but they might be anxious about traveling back to work, because if people that they're traveling with don't need to wear masks, yeah, what they're saying, it sounds like, don't know the final, but it sounds like you can go on a train and not wear a mask, but you're supposed to put the mask on if it gets busy. Okay, so now can we define busy? Is that 2 people in the carriage or 10 people in the carriage or 2? Now, at what point does the button go, and okay, now we need to put the mask on? And that's an individual thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I know. It's a bit of a mess in it, because you know, I've been on our local trains a couple of times recently, and all the signage is, you know, and the law is around wearing face covering or a mask. So you just wonder what the posters on the trains now and at the stations are going to have to say, because obviously it's not going to be a legal requirement so all the posters have got to come down. But do they dream up some posters that say something, you know, we'd like you to wear one if you could, but it's just
Yeah, would you mind awfully? Would you
yeah.
please wear one?
So it's crazy.
Yeah, but it allows. It's one of these things that allows the anxiety to run wild. Yeah, and it's that thing about, and the reason why I've done the self-help guide to go in with this, and there's some recordings attached to that as well, which I need to make sure that we've got copies of everywhere. But we're in a situation where people's anxiety is just going to get worse. Yeah, and that means, from my point of view, that we're going to be in more and more difficult situations, but we don't have to be. That's the point. It's like, and the issue about what you feed grows, what you starve dies. We keep saying these things, becomes a reality now. But what it means is that each of us has to be aware, and this is the sensitivity bit that we're not very good at hearing at the moment, is that we need to be sensitive to other people's needs. So if someone else is really anxious because I haven't got a mask on, do I say to them, don't be stupid, pull yourself together, or do I put a mask on? And in the workplace with teams of people, that's going to be a reality.
Yeah. Are you anxious about your talk tomorrow? I mean, we'll come back onto COVID stuff, but people get anxious about all sorts of things, don't they, in life? And presenting to a panel of people or a global audience is one of those things that might set certain people off. But I take it you're pretty cool about it.
I've done the kind of thing I'm going to do tomorrow so many times that it's kind of normal. So I mean, I've got that edge about awareness, and we're using a Teams kind of system that I don't use very much. So and I have to take control of it at some point, and for slides and stuff like that. So that's going to be interesting and fun. But it doesn't matter, because even if I press the wrong button or something, someone's going to say you just pressed the wrong button, and that's okay. That's all right. Yeah. And this is what I mean about these things are normal. So if I get a bit about what I'm doing, that's okay. That's a normal emotional response to have. I'm not that bothered about doing it. Like I say, I've done it a lot of times. There were times when I did. The first time I got on the stage with the guitar and I sang, I was like, when I was singing, because I was so uptight. Yeah. But when you get used to it, you just go on the stage and sing. Yeah. So, I mean, there is that bit in it, I think. But yeah, there will be a level of anxiety on it. One of the things that's weird about doing global stuff online is you don't know who's listening or who's watching, because you can't see them. So that there could be 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 across I haven't got a clue what's going to be there. If I'm doing a WebEx thing, like a lecture WebEx in a lecture theatre abroad somewhere, I can see the audience. They can see me. We can interact. Yeah. But you can't do that with the big thing. So there is that kind of try not to feel like you're talking to yourself. That when you're looking down the camera, you're looking at the people, kind of things.
So there's a couple of articles I'm going to link to. One of which is on Medical News today, and it says anxiety has been identified as one of the greatest symptoms of the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Alliance on Mental Health suggests that most people with anxiety will experience one or more of the following symptoms. So it's a sense of apprehension or dread, feeling tense or jumpy, being restless or irritable, and anticipating the worst, and watching for signs of danger. And also it's worth noting, it does note that anxiety can also cause physical symptoms. It's kind of a bit of a vicious circle there, isn't it? Because you're getting anxious, and then you're making yourself ill through that anxiety, and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and when you get into physical symptoms, you may be talking about short of breath kind of stuff. But one of the main symptoms that you get is the pooing and the peeing, because the system becomes activated. And if you watch animals before they get into full fights, they tend to empty their system. And we're no different. So that, the need to go to the loo increases. And you'll get lots of physical symptoms like that. People get hyper alert. And because they're hyper alert, they get jumpy. And then they drop things, and so there's going to be a lot of that going on. The issue about really the message I'm picking up, I don't know whether you're getting this from government, is they want people to go back into work now. They want to stop the working from home. And that's all kinds of things, doesn't it? It feeds the local businesses around the offices. There's loads of reasons to do it. But it's going to create a lot of anxiety in the people that are doing it. Yeah. And I'm, like I say, I'm already seeing it, but it's also going to be the it's going to be one of the biggest tests, I think, of where we're up to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be quite gradual, really, because I mean the kids are about to break up for summer holidays as well, so schools are going to be shut for 6 weeks, which will, I mean, just from around my way, like the roads just come alive. It pick up and drop off time, and because of school traffic, so I don't think things will feel that busy for a while in suburbia, at least, until the schools go back, and then we'll get a better sense of. But then that's 6 weeks down the line, and the numbers will have changed one way or another by that point, won't they? And depending on how much they've gone up or not, then things might have changed in terms of guidance, might they?
So, and I've got things like individuals who are part of a family, and the family have arranged a holiday, which means that they've got to do the traveling bit and everything else, and the rest of the family are fine about it, and they're terrified. So, and it's like, how do you match those two things together about people's need to get away and go on holiday, and someone else's need to not, I suppose. And I think there's so many big issues to happen about that. So in the both the blog post and in the guide that I've stuck up as a result, there's lots of ideas about how can you deal with your anxiety and realizing what it is. And there are lots of things there, like breathing exercises, doing meditative exercises, so you can learn to be in the moment and not let the past or the future get in the way. Yeah, so we can actually be where we are. So that poor lady who was going to fly in 4 months' time, but is actually in the fear of flying right now, is going to have a horrible 4 months, and God knows what the flight's going to be like. It's that kind of thing. Yeah. So
when someone like that comes to you, then how do you make that 4 months like easier? Is it kind of shutting things out for 3.5 months of it and focusing on the last 2 weeks, or what do you do?
It's interesting that some people you can work with, sometimes hypnotically, to desensitize the middle bit of their brain, the amygdala, which is kicking off, and turn the volume down on it. I think that and this is the thing about anxiety, is a good thing. If you just blindly go and get on a plane and just blindly go on a flight, anything could happen. But you need to have an awareness, so you need to be awake, because that keeps you safe. Yeah. So that little bit of that anxious edge is a good thing. You're going to get on a boat. Yeah. Are there life rafts? How do you get out of here if it starts sinking? To know those things is positive. Yeah. You go to a hotel. What's the procedure when there's a fire? So if you know that, then you go to bed. You know what I mean? That to me is normal anxiety. The anxiety issue is when it becomes overblown. And if you look at some of the Shinto type philosophies, where you put stuff in a box, and then you can't worry about it until you do it. So you can get the box out when you're about to get on the plane. You can panic as much as you want. That's okay. Yeah, but don't panic now. There's no point. Yeah. So I think there's that. But overall, it's the issue of doing the mindfulness stuff, which is in the self-help guide, so that you are in control of it and it stops being in control of you. That's the problem with all these things, whether we're talking about anger, whether we're talking about depression or anxiety. We're allowing the monkey in our head to come in and take over.
Right.
Yeah. And we have to understand that we have a choice. We don't have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. I mean, we touch on anxiety pretty much every episode, don't we? But I mean, yeah, you kind of summarize anxiety as being simply the fear of the future, which
it's the fear of what's going to happen next, isn't it?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the kind of the antidote is to live in the present, which
Yeah.
that's how you summarize things, which there's a reason why we called our website and our little business Live in the Present, right?
Present. Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important, because in the present, there's not a problem. You're sat there, I'm sat here, I've got a cup of coffee, life's okay, isn't it? Like the sun's shining, it's warm, but I could be sat here now terrified of something that is nowhere near me.
Yeah. You and I have like certain ways of dealing with our anxieties, or well, you meditate for a start, and I kind of I ride a bike at every opportunity to kind of, well, mainly for transport, but it's a good way of just focusing on the present. And you do quite a lot of running as well. Now, for many people, the idea of cycling in itself on the roads fills them with dread and anxiety.
Yeah.
Which that I can sort of understand why. There was a phase of my riding where it was quite anxious for me in certain routes that I took that I don't take anymore, just because it was too stressful in terms of traffic and certain...
but that's your anxiety teaching you something to keep you safe. So by learning from that anxiety as a positive thing, you don't take those routes anymore because you don't need to, so you're safer.
Yeah.
So that's good. Anxiety looked after you, didn't it?
It did. Yeah. And I guess with running as well, maybe it's more of a female thing. I don't want to pigeonhole it too much, but running for a lady on her own is different for a fella on their own, aren't they? Some people don't run or down certain paths because they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
For the same reason, I guess, or safe from other people.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And I'm also very aware, because I go out running early when I go. It's usually like 5:30, something like that, when I go out for a run. And there are quite a few women who go out running really early, like that. And I was wondering that the other day, as I seen my sort of fifth woman coming the other way, and we always nod and go hi, is whether they were coming out early because there's no one around.
Yeah.
Is it safer to come out, if you're a woman, to come out running at 5:30 in the morning than say 8:30 at night? I don't know. I'm sure that people have their own mindsets about that, but it's working with it so that you allow the potential anxiety to be the positive thing that keeps you safe, like you and your roots. It's the same thing. If you have that anxious, intuitive feeling that's saying shouldn't do that, and then you carry on doing it, or it just builds up inside your system and gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Whereas if you attend to it in the beginning and you use anxiety positively, as it is there to show you, oh, don't do that, that's dangerous. Don't go too near the edge of the cliff, you might fall off. Yeah, that makes sense. And I can remember as a kid being told, don't go too near there, whatever. I'm thinking, I know what you're going on about. But that's anxiety positively in action, keeping you safe. It's fine, it's good. Don't go too near the edge of the platform when the train comes flying through. Not a good place to be. Stand back behind the yellow line. That's why the yellow line.
Yeah. That's actually that's an analogy used quite a lot in the kind of cycling world, and it's kind of like, if you want to experience what it's like to be passed closely by a bus or a large car at speed, just go to a train station and wait for one of the trains to pass through at 80 miles an hour and stand as close as you can. It ain't much fun.
No. Talking about that, do you remember the new trains that they had in your place? They had them on display, so you could go and sit in them and look at them.
Yeah, the new Mersey travel trains. Yeah,
they've started coming through the stations now. They're actually running the trains to test them.
Cool. I saw some press releases about that. Yeah, I'm keen to have a look at one of those.
Yeah. I've started using the train when I can to do things like go to Liverpool and stuff like that.
Cool.
Rather than using the car and the tunnel and the parking and all that, just get on the train.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I mean, post-lockdown, for locally, Liverpool will have changed a lot. I think certainly the road network in terms of when you go out. I think the Strand and Lime Street basically not off limits in a car, but they've made it much trickier to kind of get into town, and it's going to get worse. Well, it's better. So hop on one of those shiny new trains. I guess that's another reason to be anxious, really, because we've all been shut in our homes and our local neighborhoods so much, for better or worse, that that when we do emerge, that things will have changed, won't they?
Yeah, and I am working with people who are genuinely anxious about doing things like going to a pub again. And they've been to a pub a million times in life, but suddenly it becomes this anxious issue. How am I going to go and order a drink? It's dead simple. Someone comes to you or you go to them, but it's like the anticipation of that. Oh my God, could it go wrong? And then off we go, we're into it. And it's like, we have to just learn to come back from it. So if any of you listening to this do feel that you have anxiety as an underlying issue, please just go and download the guide, the self-help guide from the site, and actually deal with it.
So is that your result? Sorry, someone was started with a chainsaw in the woods. I'll just shut my door, but you talk about your resource quickly, Sean, then.
Yeah. So the resource is part of things that I've developed for different services around the world when I've been doing things. So I've just adapted it for COVID, and covering the COVID issues around the anxiety, but the issue about how do I tame my anxiety? Like I say, we don't want to get rid of it. We want to see anxiety as a positive, useful thing, something that's going to help us. We don't want to dump it. But we need to be in control of it, not let it control us. That's the trick. Yeah,
definitely. Cool. I found a cool NHS resource that I'll put in mine about 10 tips to kind of, what is it? Hang on. 10 tips to help if you're worried about COVID-19. So it's an nhs.uk link, but it's got some really cool, easy to understand tips on how you can, overcome any anxiety or any anxious feelings you've got bubbling away. All quite straightforward and but nicely presented. So I'll link to that in the show notes. Cool. You happy?
I'm good. So how about next time we have a look at anger? Let's get stuck into some anger, because that's the other thing that's coming out. People are getting anxious, and because they can't just go, oh, I feel really anxious, it comes out as anger. And that's the next issue that I'm having to deal with in the workplace, is people getting really with each other, tough stuff.
It is. I mean, I've actually in my circle or wider circle of friends, I've heard recently that two couples that I know, kind of not close friends, but I've separated or divorced or on the verge of divorce, like in the last year since I've seen them. So some serious stuff going on out there in the world, isn't there?
And I think that the issues about the effects of COVID, whether it is divorces, bankruptcies, all kinds of things like violence and stuff like that, we're not going to realize until later when we look back. But the divorce rate or the split up rate, because a lot of people aren't married these days, but that splitting rate is getting quite high.
All right, so we'll touch on all that stuff next week. Until then, you take it easy, John.
I will do. You keep smiling.
You too. See you later.
Yeah. Bye.